Imagine walking into a courtroom like you own it, laughing at the judge to his face, and believing your husband's billions make you untouchable. Victoria Ashford Sterling, wife of tech billionaire Marcus Sterling, did exactly that. What she didn't know was that Judge Frank Caprio doesn't accept payment in arrogance. The sentence you're about to witness isn't just punishment. It's the most spectacular reality check ever delivered in a courtroom. So if you've watched this far, don't miss the end because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Before we begin, tell us in the comments. Should wealth ever influence how justice is served? And if you believe no one is above the law, subscribe to our channel right now because stories like this prove that sometimes, just sometimes, justice actually wins. It's Thursday morning, 10:30 a.m. at Providence Municipal Court. The bailiff calls out the case. The State of Rhode Island versus Victoria Ashford Sterling. The courtroom doors swing open, and in walks a woman who treats the courthouse like her personal country club. Victoria is wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit that costs more than most people's monthly rent. On her arm hangs a Hermes Birkin bag worth at least $50,000. Diamond bracelets from Cartier catch the fluorescent courthouse lights with every dismissive gesture she makes. Her Valentino sunglasses remain perched on her face even indoors, as if the ordinary lighting is beneath her standards. Behind her trails a young woman in her 20s, presumably her personal assistant, struggling to carry Victoria's coat, purse, and a leather portfolio. Victoria doesn't acknowledge her once. As she walks toward the defendant's table, she pulls out her phone and continues a conversation without lowering her voice. "Darling, I can't talk right now. I'm dealing with this ridiculous legal theater. Just confirm with the caterer that we need the Belgian chocolate fountain, not the Swiss one. The Swiss one was absolutely pedestrian at the Harrisons' party." She lets out a small, condescending laugh before finally ending the call. The people sitting in the gallery stare at her in disbelief. One elderly woman in the second row shakes her head slowly. A man in work clothes crosses his arms and mutters something under his breath. Even the court reporter pauses her typing to look up at this display of casual arrogance. Judge Frank Caprio sits at his bench with the calm, dignified presence he's known for. He's seen every kind of defendant walk through his courtroom. The scared, the remorseful, the defiant, the broken. But there's something about Victoria's entrance that makes even his experienced eyes narrow slightly. He watches as she finally reaches the defendant's table, still not having acknowledged him or the court. She sets her phone down on the table, screen up, as if she might need to check it at any moment. Her lawyer, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit named Martin Whitmore, stands beside her and whispers something urgently in her ear. She waves him off like he's a mosquito. Judge Caprio clears his throat. "Mrs. Ashford Sterling, welcome to my courtroom. Please silence your phone and give these proceedings your full attention." Victoria glances up as if noticing him for the first time. She doesn't silence her phone. Instead, she offers a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Your Honor, is that what I call you? I'm sure we can resolve this quickly. What's the damage?" 5,000. 10. My assistant can wire it right now." She gestures casually toward the young woman standing behind her, who looks mortified. The courtroom falls completely silent. It's the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. Even the bailiff, who's seen countless disrespectful defendants, raises his eyebrows. Judge Caprio's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his eyes. A sharpness that wasn't there before. "Mrs. Ashford Sterling," he says with deliberate calm, "this is a court of law, not an auction house. You're here to answer to serious charges, not to negotiate a transaction." Victoria lets out a small laugh, the kind that suggests she finds the entire situation amusing and beneath her. "With respect, Your Honor, I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. My husband donates more to this city's infrastructure than this entire courthouse is worth. Surely we can approach this," she pauses, searching for the word, "pragmatically." The gallery erupts in whispered conversations. One woman audibly gasps. A man in the back row says loud enough for others to hear, "Did she just try to buy her way out?" Judge Caprio raises his hand slightly, and the courtroom quiets again. His voice remains steady, but there's steel underneath the calm surface now. "Mrs. Ashford Sterling, your husband's donations are generous, I'm sure. But they don't purchase immunity from the law. Now, let's proceed with why you're actually here." The bailiff steps forward and reads the charges in a clear, official tone. "Mrs. Victoria Ashford Sterling, you are charged with the following. Count 1, leaving the scene of an accident. Count 2, failure to render aid. Count 3, attempted obstruction of justice. Count 4, intimidation of a witness." Victoria examines her manicured nails as the charges are read, occasionally glancing at her phone screen. Her lawyer, Martin Whitmore, shifts uncomfortably beside her, clearly aware that his client's behavior is making his job significantly harder. When the bailiff finishes, Judge Caprio looks directly at Victoria. "Mrs. Ashford Sterling, do you understand these charges?" Victoria sighs dramatically. "I understand that a minor parking mishap is being blown completely out of proportion." Judge Caprio's eyes narrow slightly. "A minor parking mishap. Is that how you describe it?" Victoria shrugs, the gesture dripping with dismissiveness. "I barely tapped another vehicle. These things happen in parking garages all the time. My car probably sustained more damage than theirs did. My Range Rover is a limited edition, you know." Judge Caprio opens a folder on his bench. "Mrs. Ashford Sterling, are you aware of who was driving the vehicle you barely tapped?" Victoria waves her hand vaguely. "Some delivery person, I think. I don't really remember. It happened so fast, and I was late for a very important charity luncheon." The irony of a woman rushing to a charity event while fleeing the scene of an accident she caused is not lost on the gallery. Several people shake their heads. Judge Caprio's voice becomes firmer. "The person you hit was Maria Gonzalez, a 58-year-old hospice nurse. She was driving a borrowed vehicle, rushing to reach a dying patient who had specifically requested her presence." Victoria barely reacts, instead turning to whisper something to her assistant about rescheduling a spa appointment. Judge Caprio continues, his patience clearly being tested. "Miss Gonzalez suffered whiplash and bruised ribs from the impact. She missed 3 days of work, unpaid, because of her injuries. The patient she was trying to reach passed away before another nurse could arrive. The borrowed van she was driving sustained $2,800 in damage. The owner, a fellow nurse, cannot afford the repairs and has been without a vehicle for 2 weeks." Victoria finally looks up, but her expression shows more annoyance than concern. "Your Honor, that's unfortunate, truly, but that's literally what insurance is for. I don't understand why we're being so dramatic about a fender bender. These situations resolve themselves through proper channels. I offered to handle it privately, but she refused to be reasonable." Judge Caprio leans forward slightly. "You offered to handle it privately. Let's examine what that means. Bailiff, please display the security footage from the Eastgate parking structure, incident timestamp 11:42 a.m., Monday, April 15th. The monitors throughout the courtroom flicker to life. The black and white security footage is grainy but clear enough. It shows Victoria's white Range Rover backing out of a parking space at considerable speed, far faster than is safe in a confined parking structure. The vehicle collides hard with the side of a blue van. The impact is forceful enough that the van rocks visibly on its suspension. This is not a gentle tap. The Range Rover stops abruptly. After a moment, the driver's door opens and Victoria steps out. She walks around to examine the damage to her vehicle, running her hand along a scrape on the bumper. Her face, even in the grainy footage, shows clear irritation. Then the van's door opens. A woman, Maria Gonzalez, emerges slowly, one hand pressed to her ribs, her face contorted in obvious pain. She approaches Victoria, and though there's no audio, her body language suggests she's asking if Victoria is all right and informing her that she's hurt. The footage continues. Victoria reaches into her designer handbag and pulls out what is unmistakably a thick fold of cash. She holds it out toward Maria, who shakes her head and takes a step back. Victoria steps forward, pushing the money toward Maria more insistently. Maria shakes her head again, more firmly this time, and pulls out her phone. The moment Maria begins dialing, Victoria's demeanor changes completely. She shoves the money back into her purse, turns on her heel, and gets back into her Range Rover. While Maria is clearly on the phone, presumably with 911, Victoria drives away. She doesn't leave a note. She doesn't wait for police. She simply leaves an injured woman standing in a parking garage, holding her ribs in pain. The courtroom watches in complete silence. When the footage ends, the quiet is deafening. Judge Caprio turns his gaze to Victoria. Still think it was just a minor mishap, Mrs. Ashford Sterling? Victoria shifts in her seat, her confidence wavering for the first time, but she recovers quickly. Victoria's voice takes on a defensive edge. Your Honor, the footage doesn't show context. I was late for an extremely important charity luncheon benefiting children's literacy. I'm on the board. My absence would have been noticed and frankly, embarrassing for the organization. I offered that woman a very generous cash settlement right there on the spot. $5,000 in cash. Do you know how many people would jump at that opportunity? But she refused. She made it complicated. She's the one who turned a simple accident into this circus. Judge Caprio's expression hardens. She made it complicated by calling the police after being injured. That's not complicated, Mrs. Ashford Sterling. That's called following the law. Victoria opens her mouth to respond, but Judge Caprio continues. And speaking of the law, let's discuss what happened next. Bailiff, please call our witness. A man in a security uniform enters the courtroom. He's in his mid-50s with a weathered face and tired eyes that suggest he's worked long shifts for many years. He takes his position and is sworn in. The bailiff asks him to state his name for the record. Robert Chen, he says clearly. I'm the head of security at Eastgate Parking Structure. Have been for 12 years. Judge Caprio addresses him directly. Mr. Chen, you were on duty the morning of April 15th when this incident occurred. Yes, Your Honor. I responded when our cameras flagged the collision. Can you tell the court what you witnessed when you arrived at the scene? Robert Chen nods and pulls out a small notepad. I arrived approximately 3 minutes after the impact. The injured party, Miss Gonzalez, was on the phone with emergency services. She was clearly in pain, holding her side. I approached to offer assistance and to get information for our incident report. Judge Caprio gestures for him to continue. What happened then? Mr. Chen glances briefly at Victoria before continuing. The woman who caused the accident, he points toward Victoria, had already left the scene. But Miss Gonzalez gave me the license plate number she'd managed to photograph before the vehicle departed. I radioed it into our office and pulled the security footage. Judge Caprio looks at his notes. Mr. Chen, did you have any interaction with Mrs. Ashford Sterling that day? Yes, Your Honor. She returned to the parking structure approximately 40 minutes later. I assumed she realized leaving the scene was a mistake. When she came back, what did she say? Robert Chen's jaw tightened slightly. She approached my security station and asked if anyone had filed a report about the accident. I informed her that yes, the injured party had already spoken with police and that I had provided them with the security footage. Judge Caprio leans forward. How did Mrs. Ashford Sterling respond to that information? Mr. Chen takes a breath. She became very agitated. She told me I'd made a huge mistake. She said, and I wrote this down immediately after because I knew it was important, do you know who my husband is? Marcus Sterling owns half this city. If you filed that report, I'll have your job by morning. The courtroom erupts in murmurs. Victoria's face flushes red. That's a complete fabrication, she says loudly. He's clearly lying for attention or money or whatever his angle is. Judge Caprio raises his hand for silence. Mrs. Ashford Sterling, you'll have a chance to respond. Mr. Chen, did anyone else witness this conversation? Yes, Your Honor. My colleague, David Park, was standing right next to me at the security desk. He heard everything. We both documented it in our incident report immediately after she left. And we also have audio from our security station. The judge nods slowly. Play the audio, please. There's a brief crackle of static, then Victoria's voice comes through clearly. The audio quality is surprisingly good. You need to make that report disappear. Do you understand me? I offered that woman $5,000 cash to walk away. She refused, which was stupid on her part, but that's her problem. Now you're compiling evidence like you're some kind of detective. You're a parking attendant. My husband's name is on buildings all over this city. One phone call from me and you'll be looking for work tomorrow. So I suggest you lose that footage and forget this ever happened. Do we understand each other? Robert Chen's voice responds, steady and professional. Ma'am, I can't do that. The report has already been filed with police. Then you just ended your career over a fender bender. Congratulations on your principles. I hope they keep you warm when you're unemployed. The audio clicks off. The silence in the courtroom is absolute. Every eye turns to Victoria, whose face has gone from red to pale. Her hands grip the edge of the table, knuckles white. Judge Caprio's voice cuts through the quiet like a blade. Mrs. Ashford Sterling, do you still maintain that Mr. Chen is fabricating his testimony? Victoria's lawyer quickly stands. Your Honor, my client was under extreme stress. She'd just been in an accident. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. Judge Caprio doesn't break his gaze from Victoria. I asked your client a question, Counselor. Mrs. Ashford Sterling, do you deny that this is your voice on the recording? Victoria's mouth opens and closes several times before words finally come out. That recording is taken out of context. I was upset. I'd just been in an accident, and this security guard was treating me like a criminal when I was trying to do the right thing by coming back. Judge Caprio's expression doesn't soften. You came back 40 minutes after fleeing the scene, and instead of taking responsibility, you threatened a man's livelihood because he was doing his job. That's your version of doing the right thing? Victoria stands abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is absurd. You're treating me like I'm some kind of dangerous criminal over a parking lot bump. Do you have any idea what my husband has done for this city? The Sterling Foundation has donated millions. We employ thousands of people. We fund scholarships, community programs, and hospital wings. And you're going to crucify me because some nurse who probably makes $40,000 a year wants her 15 minutes of fame? The courtroom explodes in reaction. People gasp, others shake their heads in disgust. One man in the gallery stands up and points at Victoria, his face red with anger, before the bailiff gestures for him to sit down. Judge Caprio's voice cuts through the chaos like thunder. Mrs. Ashford Sterling, sit down now. Victoria remains standing, her voice rising even higher. I will not. This is a witch hunt. You're punishing me for being successful. You're making an example of me because my last name opens doors that yours never will. This entire proceeding is biased against people of means. Judge Caprio stands slowly. The simple act of him rising to his feet somehow commands more authority than any gavel strike. His voice becomes dangerously quiet. Bailiff, if Mrs. Ashford Sterling does not sit down in the next 3 seconds, add contempt of court to her charges and prepare to remand her into custody until she can demonstrate basic respect for these proceedings. The words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. Victoria's lawyer grabs her arm and frantically whispers in her ear. For a moment, it seems like she might continue her tirade, but something in Judge Caprio's unwavering stare finally penetrates her armor of entitlement. She sits down with an exaggerated huff, crossing her arms like a petulant child. Judge Caprio remains standing for a moment longer before returning to his seat. "Before I make my ruling," he says, his tone measured and deliberate, "I'm going to hear from several people who wanted to speak today. I don't usually allow this, but given Mrs. Ashford Sterling's claims about her character and contributions to society, I think it's important to hear additional perspectives." The first person called forward is a young man in his early 20s wearing a valet uniform. He approaches nervously, clearly uncomfortable with public speaking. He states his name as Christopher Mendez and explains that he's worked as a valet at the Riverside Country Club for 5 years. Judge Caprio asks him why he wanted to speak today. Christopher takes a deep breath. "Your Honor, I've parked Mrs. Sterling's car at least twice a week for 5 years. In all that time, she's never once said thank you. Not once. She's never looked me in the eye. She's never acknowledged that I exist except to complain. Last month, I was helping an elderly club member into their vehicle first because they had a walker and needed assistance. Mrs. Sterling arrived and had to wait maybe 90 seconds. She reported me to my supervisor for taking too long and being inefficient. I almost lost my job. I have a daughter at home. That job feeds my family. And she almost took it away because she had to wait 90 seconds. Victoria scoffs loudly. That's completely irrelevant to this case. That has nothing to do with a traffic accident. Judge Caprio's gaze shifts to her. It has everything to do with character, Mrs. Ashford Sterling. Continue, Mr. Mendez. Christopher nods. I just wanted the court to know that this isn't someone who made one mistake. This is who she is. She treats people like we're invisible unless we're in her way. Then we're problems to be eliminated. He returns to his seat, and Judge Caprio calls the next witness. A middle-aged woman in a simple dress comes forward. She identifies herself as Patricia Ruiz, former household staff member for the Sterling family. Judge Caprio asks how long she worked for them. 3 years, Your Honor. I was let go last December. Can you tell the court why you were let go? Patricia's voice wavers slightly, but she continues. I asked for Christmas Eve off because my daughter was having surgery the day after Christmas. I wanted to be with her. Mrs. Sterling told me that the holidays were their busiest social season and that my family obligations were not her problem. When I took the day off anyway to be with my daughter, she fired me. She called me replaceable. Those were her exact words. You're replaceable. I'd worked for that family for 3 years. I'd missed birthdays, school plays, family gatherings to accommodate their schedule. And when I needed one day, I was replaceable. Victoria shifts uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushing with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. These are disgruntled former employees, she says, her voice tight. They're clearly looking for revenge or a payout. This is character assassination, not evidence. Judge Caprio's expression remains unchanged. No, Mrs. Ashford Sterling. This is character evidence. There's a difference. The third witness is a woman in her 40s who owns a small boutique in downtown Providence. She introduces herself as Ellen Hoffman and explains that her store specializes in high-end designer clothing. Judge Caprio asks why she felt compelled to testify today. Ellen takes a steadying breath before speaking. Last year, Mrs. Sterling purchased over $8,000 worth of clothing from my store for a charity gala. She wore every single piece to the event with the tags carefully hidden inside the garments. The next morning, she returned everything, every single item, demanding a full refund. When I explained our policy that worn items cannot be returned, she threatened to destroy my business. She said she'd tell everyone in her social circle that my store sold counterfeit goods. She said she'd post reviews online calling me a fraud. She said she'd make sure I never sold another dress in this city. Judge Caprio leans forward. What did you do? Ellen's voice cracks slightly. I gave her the refund. I couldn't afford to lose my business. I have 3 employees who depend on those jobs. My mother co-signed the loan for my store. I couldn't risk everything over $8,000, even though I knew she'd worn those clothes and I'd never be able to resell them. So she stole from you, essentially. Ellen nods slowly. Yes, Your Honor. She did. And she smiled the whole time. Victoria jumps to her feet again, her composure completely shattered. This is outrageous. These people are lying. They're coordinating their stories to take me down. My lawyer will sue every single one of them for defamation. Judge Caprio's voice becomes ice cold. Sit down, Mrs. Ashford Sterling. This is your last warning. Victoria sits, but her hands are shaking now, whether from rage or fear is unclear. Judge Caprio looks down at the documents before him, then back up at Victoria. Her lawyer looks like he wants to disappear into the floor. The gallery is completely silent, everyone leaning forward to hear what comes next. Mrs. Ashford Sterling, Judge Caprio begins, his voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. You came into my courtroom today believing that your wealth made you untouchable. You laughed at these proceedings. You tried to buy your way out of responsibility. You insulted an injured woman who dedicates her life to caring for the dying. You threatened working people whose only crime was doing their jobs with integrity. And through it all, you've shown absolutely no remorse, no empathy, and no understanding of why you're here. Victoria opens her mouth to speak, but Judge Caprio raises his hand. I'm not finished. For the past hour, I've listened to you dismiss everyone around you as beneath your consideration. The nurse you injured. The security guard you threatened. The valet who parks your car. The woman who cleaned your home. The small business owner whose livelihood you held hostage. In your world, these people are invisible unless they inconvenience you. Then they become obstacles to be removed with money or threats or your husband's name. But here's what you don't understand, Mrs. Ashford Sterling. In this courtroom, your money means nothing. Your last name means nothing. Your husband's donations mean nothing. What matters is the law, and you broke it. What matters is human decency, and you've shown none. Judge Caprio pauses, letting his words settle over the room like snow. Now I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're not going to write a check and walk away. You're not going to have your lawyer make this disappear. You're going to face real consequences, perhaps for the first time in your privileged life. And those consequences are going to teach you something that your wealth has allowed you to avoid learning. That actions have consequences, that other people matter, and that service is not something you buy at a gala, it's something you do with your own 2 hands. Victoria's face has gone completely pale. Her earlier defiance has evaporated, replaced by something that might be fear or might be the first glimmer of understanding. Judge Caprio continues. For leaving the scene of an accident and failing to render aid, I'm fining you $15,000 to be paid directly to Maria Gonzalez for her medical expenses, lost wages, and the damage to the vehicle she was borrowing. Victoria exhales slightly, as if relieved that it's just money. But Judge Caprio isn't finished. Your driving privileges are suspended for 18 months effective immediately. You will not operate any vehicle during this period. Victoria's eyes widen. 18 months. How am I supposed to, she starts, but Judge Caprio cuts her off. Public transportation, Mrs. Ashford Sterling. The same buses and trains used by the invisible people you've spent your life looking through. You're about to become very familiar with how the other 99% lives. But we're not done yet.